Well, last week I told them to prove me wrong, and they did. Larry Davis and Stevie Ray Vaughan once sang about Texas floods, and thanks to a first half deluge, Orange County did enough to finally get a win on the road. We'll recap that and more. This is the Orange and Black Soccer Cast. It's been a while since we've had a road win to talk about, so I'm sure someone will know the exact amount of days, but we won't worry about that. Instead, it's just a good reason to celebrate with a nice drink. So I've got a Peroni 0-0 because it's the work week, after all, everybody. But my guest tonight, or our fellow host, I'm not sure how exactly this works when you show up here, DK. But, you're here nonetheless, and no one else is. So what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, I am drinking some nice whiskey, neat, and in celebration of the victory on the road, which I believe, and I'm sure somebody will correct me, but I believe it's been 15 games in all competitions since we have had a victory on the road. I'm sure there's a similar stat on that it's about the same for shutouts as well. So,
yeah, now that I think about it, was that would have been the match against Memphis. I don't know why I struggled so hard.
Right, yeah.
Remember what
that was the last time we got a win on the road and the last time we got a shutout. So
yeah. It was also, I think, maybe the last time Cameron Dunbar really put on a clinic and showed people just how good he is. That being said, there's plenty more to come in this season. Let's take a look at the season really quickly with Saturday's 3-0 victory over El Paso. Orange County comfortably in 7th place, with the whole 1 point and game in hand on 8th place Vegas right now. Things are once again kind of tight. They're a win out of maybe 6, but ultimately I think we've talked about it all season thus far. There's parity in the West, so you win 2-3 games and somebody else drops points and you can find yourself either at the very top, or if you're the club dropping the points, somewhere near the bottom. Heath, I think we'll talk more about this later when our guest joins us, but 12 matches played, 16 points, 7th place. Where does this lie for you? Where did you think Orange County was going to be at this point in the year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was really excited going into the season, especially with the kind of firepower that we do have offensively. I think our defense was always kind of a big question, as there are a handful of players that we don't know that are filling up our back line, or didn't know. Now we know them. But so I don't know. I mean, I think if you look at the past few seasons, we're probably around the same spot. Maybe have a little bit more points, but probably in the 5 to 7 range as far as placing goes. I think it's been a while since early or midway through the season that we've actually been in the top 4. So I know we've talked about it, to death, but I'm worried still, but I'm not panicking. With all the parity in the West, we can still shoot up to the top 4 within just a few games if everything goes right, if we do well. So you never know. And it's not time to panic. We're not at that halfway point yet, even though it's coming up really close. And that's always been my panic button moment. So we'll see where we are by game 15. I'm hoping it's at least 5th place. That would be really, really nice, I think. That will kind of get me into some confidence. But in reality, we're still in the playoff race right now, and we're actually only 6 points away from 1st place. So although we've been very inconsistent in our performances, it seems that everybody in the West has, which is at least doing us a favor and can give us some breathing room to hopefully have a second half season comeback.
It's pretty typical that Orange County does have a second half season comeback, at least when things go well. That's usually how it's gone. For those of you watching along, you'll notice one thing. Orange County has conceded 20 goals. I think that's tied for third worst in the West.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, they're not alone among playoff teams. Dreaded run from it, Phoenix Rising arrives all the same. Phoenix has scored 23 goals and conceded 20. So it's a bit chaotic out here. They call it the Western Conference for a reason. New Mexico, great defensively, conceding a goal a game, I guess. But they're managing to, score a goal and a half a game. So it's pure chaos, and I think teams are starting to figure out how they want to play. Early teams that struggled, a la Orange County, Oakland Roots, you might see them start to do a little bit better as teams overlook them, as teams don't have an idea for how to play against them, as they themselves make adjustments. Felt like Orange County made an adjustment on Saturday. Maybe that's just the difference when we actually managed to find the back of the net. Let's talk about Saturday night's match. There's a lot. DK, why don't you give us your high level, your broad strokes on this one?
I mean, I might not be as high on this victory as some people, but it is still a 3-0 victory. I think it's been quoted on the podcast and at least in the Discord or amongst fans and stuff that we make our own luck, right? So the 3 goals that we got, they weren't all the prettiest goals. One of them was an own goal. That was probably going wide. But in those 10 minutes that we got those 3 goals, that was the best we looked all game. I mean, the passes were clean. It was a complete team performance, most of those, chances that got created there. And I think you really saw Dunbar shine on the right side, getting the ball into the box and creating those 2 big moments. Even if one of them ended up being an own goal, it was still, a lot of his dribbling into the box, totally outplaying, El Paso's left back. So those are things that were, fantastic to see. I just would have loved to see a more consistent element of that throughout the rest of the game. So those were my highs. Now to get a little bit into my lows, I was worried before we got that first goal. I mean, even when that first goal happened, it's like, who knows what's going to happen next? But we were giving away so many passes. I think we were completely sloppy in the midfield. And, I was talking about it while at the watch party with some other fans. It really just seemed we were trying to do too much with our passing, trying to be a little too cheeky. I don't know, trying to be too stylistic in the passing, where a lot of those passes were either just complete misses, passing into empty space where nobody was, or just giving the ball away to El Paso for free, which really worried me. And unfortunately, we didn't see that get really any better in the second half. However, in the second half, of course, we're up 3-0, so we can defend a lot more. But in those 10 minutes that we got those 3 goals, that changed. We were doing simple passes up the field, across the field, playing on both sides, really stretching out El Paso's defense and midfield. That's the moment where we looked in control. And that's what I want to see from the team moving forward. And I guess one other, which is really the biggest key to us actually getting this victory, is that our defense for the first time this season looked solid. And I've been talking a lot, so you can go into what you think, and then maybe I'll throw in some more about the defense. But that was really my highlight of the whole match, was our defense, and that's great to say.
That's a great segue, DK. Maybe one of the top 10 segues that we've ever had on the show. How do I put this? Welcome back. Shout out Shuttler. It's been so long. We've missed you so much, but you're back. I feel maybe that you're more harsh on the team wasting possession. Yes, at this level, I think that's expected, fair. Do you blame it on miscommunication because the team looks different for the 30th week in a row? Do you blame it on the field? I don't know. There's so many aspects of that. But what we did do well was moments in transition. And I think the last time I saw us do well in a moment of transition was Kevin Partita winning the ball and laying it off to Mohamed War against Colorado. Game set, done already at that point. But that was a little glimpse of what we've really needed to do all season long. This one, 45 minutes, we did it. If you look at the back line, El Paso was all over the place. They were unprepared, and Orange County did a really good job of exploiting whatever they saw. And I, as much as I want to ask him later, probably can't. I would love to know what Coach Stone and the staff saw and how they were able to exploit that so well, because consistently they were able to pull a defender out of position and then just play the ball into open space that was left behind. And El Paso had no response for what Orange County was doing. So whether you look at that from the players are simply better, and Ethan Zubak and Cameron Dunbar certainly are an incredible pairing. It was great to see him doing well. Or if you look at it as, well, our manager is just better than yours. Danny Stone is pretty great, so I'm gonna give him this one. He's gotten it wrong a handful of times. Do I think this whole season's on him? No, not necessarily. I'm trying to think of other main things. I mean, we found the back of the net 3 times this match, and even if it wasn't the most exciting second half, and if you're new to USL, if it's 3-0 at the end of 45, it's probably not going to look too much different at the end of 90. Orange County did well to kind of fall back, really look to just frustrate them, and then force shots from distance. So while we did concede a whole bunch early on that were maybe a little more dangerous, by the time that Orange County had control of the game, there's no reason to kind of expand yourselves and open yourselves up to any danger. Force them to take pot shots. They took shots from distance. They had a couple good chances, but for the most part, if you saw somebody cut in, maybe onto their stronger foot, or even just to put a cross in, you immediately saw, 3 or 4 players pressing. So it was nice to see maybe what Coach Stone has wanted out of this team for the entire year to come to fruition somehow on the road in Texas. I'll take it. Would I have preferred to have seen this a month and a half ago? Yes. Would I have preferred to have seen this, at any point prior to this season? Absolutely. But I'm cautiously optimistic that this might be the beginning of something really, really special. DK, any players that you want to shout out in this match beyond maybe Ethan Zubak for scoring a brace and Cameron Dunbar for his distribution and forcing an own goal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talked about Cameron a little bit. He was fantastic on the right side, and obviously Ethan getting a brace. Everybody says that I signed him over in the CLC, so you're welcome for Zubak. But I just want to throw out that his second goal, the third of the night, was, I think, fantastic. I mean, chipping it over the keeper like that with the outside of his right foot. I loved watching that, when I was writing the recap. Really, really fantastic. And then other players that really stood out to me, Josh in the chat just pointed out, I think Tom Brewitt had a fantastic game. I think Latinovic had a fantastic game as well. I think they really held down, the defense as those center backs, as we want them to do. I know, between them, I think they had about 19 interceptions and about 3 or 4 blocked shots. And that's something that I loved to see in this game, was not just them, but Dogman had some blocked shots. So did Nico, actually just stopping those long shots from getting to Colin. El Paso had 24 shots throughout the entire match and only 3 on target. And I think that's a complete credit to our defense, as you alluded to earlier, about we forced them to make those kind of pot shots from outside the box multiple times because we were tight and there was no way for their offense, who in the beginning of this season has been a fairly good offense for El Paso, to get into the box to make, really dangerous chances happen. And I think that credit fully goes to our defense, to Kevin Partita as well, has that kind of destroyer role for us. So yeah, I mean, Although obviously, I might not be on as high as everybody else on the performance because it was a victory. I do think that I am also hopeless or cautiously optimistic that this could be the turn, because from what I saw from our defense and from what I have seen from our midfield and, in previous games this season, I think that if all of those things come together, we can be a contender. We've said it on the show before, and people have already blasted me, fan wise, of being too optimistic based off of our performances. But like, we have the talent. Something just hasn't clicked quite yet. And it looked like this game, a few more pieces clicked. And I would love to see the progress of that. And we have a bye week. So hopefully, the momentum doesn't stop, and hopefully in training, we can just build off of that. And I know that's something we'll probably be able to ask our guest about a little bit later. So,
with any luck, if we look at the XG from this match, Orange County just under 1 XG, El Paso just over 1 XG. So, should this match have been a draw? No, I don't think so. Ultimately, if you look at exactly how many, well, okay, it still has them in half an XG, which is incredible. Ultimately, I think if you take 20 shots, yes, if most of them are, low percentage chances, which is what we force them to do, you will eventually, accumulate enough. But of course, it's not actually one off of XG. So this felt like not quite a Richard Chaplow-esque thing, but it also felt like this was a match where, hey, if this was a playoff match, would we see 3-0 as a scoreline? No, but would we see Orange County take an early lead and then hold it and look capable of holding it? Yes. Now, El Paso can't find the net. I think it's been a few hours for them. Does a playoff team have that same issue? I'm not sure. Does a playoff team eventually find the back of the net? Potentially. But if it's do or die for Orange County, if it's do or die for Danny Stone at this point in June, then so be it.
There's a lot of good
practice for October, November, when the things really matter. And of course, we should shout out the man who's much smarter than all of us, Mr. John Morrissey, who did an excellent write-up on exactly how Orange County managed to beat El Paso on Saturday night. You can find his stuff over on Backfield. Wow. There was one other thing I want to bring up about this match.
Prove me wrong, everybody.
I love being proved
Flip
wrong.
of the season.
Proved wrong in 2021.
Flip of the season.
And I was proved wrong on Saturday night. I think my biggest gripe is that I have to hear my own voice when I'm proven wrong. So maybe next time I'll write it down and I'll learn from that one.
You know what? The team was watching and saw you and were like, damn it, Dylan, we're going to prove you wrong. And they went out there and they did. So hopefully they can keep that mentality and just think about Dylan. They're going to have a picture of you on the locker room saying, prove me wrong. And that's going to be their motivation throughout.
I just hope it's a good picture of me, But if
it's going to be the one from 2021.
Yeah, that's horrifying.
We put it on the show, so
like a major league situation, and they're, just like kicking a soccer ball out the cardboard cut out of me every time they win. Cool. If that's what it takes, I'll handle it.
If that's what it takes, I would gladly be that too. So yeah, whatever it takes to happen.
I'm trying to think of the oh yes, the point I was going to make originally was it was really nice to see just how freely Orange County can transition when Ryan Dogman's on the pitch. So we saw this with Zubak's second goal. Really, I think about that one. Third, technically, but one was offside. So second goal to make it 3-0. We see a quick little succession of passes. So PK, were being far, far too critical. They weren't trying to be too cute. They weren't trying to be too clever. Just a few quick passes.
That was one of their good moments.
It was, yeah. Unlocks the initial press, allows them to just get right up on top of a back line that was thoroughly underprepared and disorganized. And Ryan Dogman's key to that one. He gets so high up. There's a moment before the ball is played into Ethan Zubak where Ryan Dogman is the furthest player up the pitch as a left back, and he's a good 5 to 7 meters offside. And he waits, like he's not running in to try and make a play, but it does force the El Paso defense to accommodate for him and to start to drop, because what if the ball is played, over? It opens up all this space. Ethan Zubak obviously gets onto it, takes a little bit heavier a touch than I think he really means to. And who's waiting there in the 6? Ryan Dogman. Now, shout out to Ethan Zubak for somehow managing to get his right foot to that and put that in the back of the net. I would just say left foot every single time.
Yeah, always.
Obviously, there's a reason that I'm sitting here talking to you on Tuesday night, and Ethan Zubak is a professional soccer player. So, but Ryan Dogman was there, and I think when he's out of the team, Orange County just loses that flexibility. And we don't need that flexibility on both sides of the pitch, as nice as it was to have with Brent Richards and with Owen Lamb and with Grayson Duty for a couple weeks at the beginning of the season. It's nice to have that flexibility on both sides of the pitch, but even just having it on one side of the pitch causes problems, especially when Cameron Dunbar is on the other side. It just means that Orange County has multiple ways that they can get after you and beat you, whether it's Ethan Zubak, who's well over 6 foot and doing it in the air, or, it's a Cameron Dunbar or Chris Hagart or a Bryce Jameson getting on the ball and causing you problems.
Yeah.
It's nice to see.
To that point as well, as far as, not having, somebody like Grayson Duty on the right side now, it's fantastic when we do have Ryan Dogman there. And luckily without that kind of similar wing back strength on the right side, is that you also have Kyle Scott in the center, who consistently shows how fantastic of just a conductor he is on the pitch, and he can get it anywhere, So even though you don't maybe have that right wing back strength that we had at the start of the season, as far as just player skill goes, we do have Kyle Scott who can still get it up to Cameron Dunbar on the right-hand side when needed, who can switch it right back over to Dogman to quickly pass it up to whoever's on the left side right now, Ethan Zubak. And I don't think we've really touched on it too much. I know you mentioned it, but like the chemistry and pairing of Cameron Dunbar and Ethan Zubak has been fantastic to see just this season. And it seems that it's like now that they've both come back from injury, now it seems with this match that it's in full swing again. And I think we got to see that towards the end of last season, since they both had time to settle into the team. And I think we saw that in the first match of the season. And then Cameron got injured. And then when he came back, Ethan got injured. And now we have them both back again. And I think that's going to be a huge strength for us, because those two players obviously love playing together. And I think really grew into this team over the course of last season. And I can't wait to see what they do, throughout the rest of the season.
It felt like a good way for Orange County to start making their run last year. It feels like things are falling into place for that. Again, we got a clean sheet for the first time in a very long time. And we managed to score more than one goal as well, which I guess has been happening with some relative frequency. DK, I'm just out of curiosity, if you had to give a man of the match, who's getting it and why?
If I was to give the man of the match, I think I'm giving it to Tom Brewitt. I think I wrote it in my article, not to plug my own, crap.
But you should. Maybe you should take a moment to plug it. Where can you find your post-game review?
Yeah, orangeandblacksoccergas.com. You can check out all of my post-game reviews. But yeah, for me, it was the defense that was key, right? Because the thing is with this league, being 3-0 up at halftime really doesn't mean anything. I think we even saw against, I forget exactly who it was, but we were up 3-0 in a previous match this season, and then the game ended 3-2 or maybe 4-2. But It was 4-2. All right. Yeah. But still, like, teams can come back, and especially with what we've seen from our defense this season, we haven't had a shutout yet until this game. So I think Tom Brewitt was huge in orchestrating the fact that we were able to get the shutout, block shots, made interceptions, and something that I've been harping on the team for in the past too is like what we do on set pieces and crosses. And this game, we didn't give them a shot on target off of either one of those. We booted it out before it was even possible, and Tom Brewitt was a huge part of that. Granted, stats-wise, rating player-wise, Ethan Zubak, he got 2 goals. He was fantastic. I think he was at an 8.5 or higher stat-wise. And so obviously I think he did get our man of the match from our club, which is awesome to see. I love Zubak. But for me personally, I really want to shine the defense because most, improved players basically in this match is what I can see from our back line.
Fair enough. Producer Andy was kind enough to give us a handful of player ratings for this one. I personally would have to give it to Ethan Zubak. Unfortunately, if you score a brace and your team wins, how do you not get man of the match? I presume if everybody else on the team or if one other person on the team did something truly incredible, maybe saved 2 goals and assisted. Zubak with an 8.8. Kyle Scott with 7.7. Tom Brewitt just a 7.3, but I feel like maybe this is one where the eye test does a little bit more. And then Nico Benalcazar with an 8.0. So overall, a very good performance from Orange County. And for other great performances, you could always, like or comment or subscribe to our social media channels. And that is my very, very horrible plug shortly before we bring on probably the only reason anybody's watching tonight, and that is to talk to the man himself, head coach for Orange County, Danny Stone. Danny, welcome back to the Orange Black Soccercast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Hope you guys are all doing well.
I don't want to speak for everybody, but if I have to, riding a nice high after Saturday night. I hope you are as well.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, we're pleased with the result, and very, very happy to approach this week's training and obviously a bye week this weekend with a good result from Saturday. I think a very tough place to go and play, especially a team who we know have done very well so far this season. I think at this time of year, it was the weather was not easy, and it's never an easy place to go and play, particularly against a team who are performing well right now. So we're very pleased overall with of course what we came away with.
Danny, maybe without giving away any trade secrets, how did you prepare the team? Because it really seemed like, and I mentioned this earlier in the show, Orange County just pulled the El Paso defense out of position consistently and then exploited that. If you can, how did you set the team up for Saturday night?
Well, I think we knew that El Paso had been a team who've scored a lot of goals this season. We knew that they particularly were dangerous in, I think, transition moments and counter-attacking situations. And from watching them in their previous games, they play in a way where they perhaps risk a little bit defensively with, keeping their front three very much ahead of the ball quite often. And so we knew that was going to be something that perhaps on occasion we could exploit, but at the same time that's a dangerous aspect for them. And as I said, they've scored a lot of goals in transition and shown a lot of quality, and they are a good group of players with good technicians and players who are very clever in terms of combination. And up front they have a couple of wingers who are probably less vertical in style, but very much comfortable in moving inside and dribbling it at a back line and combining, like I say, in the tighter spaces. And they've been very successful with this. And I think for us, we overall wanted to make sure that we put in a very solid defensive performance. And of course, we were putting ourselves under appropriate pressure to go and get the first away victory and result of the season. And along with that, we hoped the first clean sheet of the season. And of course, those two things was something that we were able to achieve. So we were happy with that. But we knew that was going to be a very important aspect to this away performance, as it is with any away game. But I think particularly, again, against a team who have been performing well, who have had a lot of good results. And I think teams have found it very difficult going to play in El Paso this year. And, so even more so, I was really pleased with the display, particularly defensively, that the team were able to produce on Saturday.
I appreciate you mentioning that defensively. It seemed like the second half was understandably a little more pragmatic than the first. Was getting a clean sheet key to Saturday night for the team, or was it just going to be an added bonus to the result?
Well, I think it is a key. Yes, I mean it's a key in terms of obviously getting a result. Clean sheets. I mean, of course, you keep a clean sheet and you can't lose the game. But I think in terms of not just winning the game, but winning it with a clean sheet. These were two big targets, like I said, for us. So I think achieving both of those things was a great way to come away from El Paso. And I think of course, we'd have been happy with a victory, however that came. But I think particularly, with the added value of keeping that clean sheet, that was a target for us. And so to be able to say we achieved both of those goals that we set for this performance was I believe, important for the group. Yes, absolutely.
Got it. And then bigger picture right now as we head towards the halfway point, and not quite there, admittedly. 12, and just looking at the league here, 12 matches played, 16 points, 5 wins, 1 draw, 6 losses. I'm going to ask you one simple question here. Is this the way that you envisioned it going to start 2025?
I mean, of course, in an ideal world, we'd like to be on more points. We'd like to have won more games. I think in the reality of USL seasons, it's very hard to predict what the season looks like in the first, I think, 10 or 12 games, especially. I think this year you can see that the parity amongst teams is very close, especially I think in the West. And I think we've probably mentioned that a couple of times, but it's a league this year where, every single game is a tough game, and every team that you play has good players. They're a good team, and I believe for the most part that everybody on their day playing well has a chance to win the game that they're playing. I think that's probably fairly true across the board. You can probably look at some standings and pick a couple of teams who you feel are strong and will remain strong through the season in terms of consistency. But I do think that everybody has quality, and everybody has a good team that they can put out on the field. And we are one of those teams. But every team that we play also puts a test in front of us. So I suppose to answer your question, Dylan, it's not the exact way that in an ideal world we hope that things would go. But I think on the other hand, if I look at things more recently, I've not been displeased with a lot of the overall performances more recently, and I'm talking really in the last sort of 5 or 6 games here. Some of the results I think haven't gone our way in games where I feel we've perhaps actually deserved a lot more than we got, and probably honestly games where certainly in possession we've performed, I think, better maybe than we performed on Saturday. But I think the difference on Saturday was, of course, the clinical nature in terms of scoring the 3 goals in that 10-12 minute spell right before half time, and taking chances that we created, because I think we're a team who maybe haven't struggled to create chances through the season. We just haven't rewarded ourselves often enough for those chances that we've created. And then, of course, on the opposite side of the ball, it's too long before we were able to keep the clean sheet that we did this weekend. And you put both of those things together, and the final result, of course, has a reflection of that. But as I said, I think there's plenty of games actually that I've not been unhappy with the overall performance, and felt that we certainly played well enough and created enough, and actually also honestly limited the opponent to relatively few and not too many clear-cut scoring opportunities, but still conceded too many goals in those moments that we did face. And there's a few reasons I think behind that, which I don't need to necessarily go into right now. But my point being, we've won 2 out of the last 3 league games, so I'm pleased with that. I think with the result away in El Paso this weekend, we, like I said, go into the bye week feeling like we've achieved a couple of targets that we set ourselves, and now we have 2 weeks to work again and to remain healthy and to go into the next game against Sacramento in the Jägermeister Cup and continue some momentum, we hope. And again, we're looking forward to be back at home in a couple of weeks, and it feels like a little while since we've played at home, and we'll be excited for that one. And again, I think that's a long way of answering your question to say not exactly the way I'd envisioned it completely, but I feel actually there's probably a lot more general positives than some of the results have reflected. And so I certainly move forwards here with a lot of confidence and a lot of positivity and absolute belief in the group that we have.
Well, I appreciate the depth of the answer. For those of you watching live, if you want to ask Coach Stone a question, now would be the time to drop them into the chat, while DK here has some more questions.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us once again, Coach Stone. We love having you here. You already kind of touched up on how hard it is to win in El Paso, and especially in Orange County history. I don't have the numbers. Our statistician Nathan would have more of those numbers exactly, but we haven't had the best luck in our history of winning in El Paso. So coming off of that victory, first away victory of the season and first shutout, what are some of the things that you take away and the squad takes away from that as the biggest strengths that you want to move forward with, as well as maybe some areas that you want to continue working on in these next couple weeks?
I think the key to this game and this, eventual result was to be very resolute and have a defensive strength about us and a grit in the performance defensively. I felt that was, I think it's like you rightly said. I think when the score is 3-0 at half time, the second half means we don't have to open ourselves up particularly in that second half. And I think we probably rode 10 minutes or so at the beginning of the second half where, we were adjusting a little bit to a couple of changes that El Paso made. I think they had probably the one opportunity in the game came in that earlier part of the second half. And I felt once we'd sort of seen out that initial 15, 20 minutes of the second half, then we looked, I felt, albeit not having possession of the ball particularly, but I felt we worked very hard. We limited opportunities. We certainly limited, I thought, El Paso to shooting from distance and didn't grant them clear-cut opportunities. And, I think defensively put in a lot of hard work in, again, tough conditions in on the day there in El Paso, hotter than it was in Phoenix the previous week. And, that was not an easy task for the players. And I felt that every man that participated in the game, whether they played minutes or gave their energy from the bench supporting the group, it took everybody's energy and effort to contribute to that result. And this is something that I think we take forwards with us to say, look, we have proof behind us here now that we are capable of being a resolute, gritty, tough defensive team when we need to be. And I think we can probably, we can improve in terms of what we do with the ball from this game. I felt like I mentioned earlier, we probably have played previous games where we've been more fluid and we've probably created more with the ball. But in this game, away from home, there is no getting away from the fact that you have to be tough to beat. And if you want away results, if you want to get points on the road, that is that's a style of performance that you have to show. And that's the type of personality that I need from the players and from the team to continue to get a result away from home. And I felt that was something we showed. And the most pleasing part of that result was, I think, this aspect, which now we have to continue and stay consistent with.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, maybe a tough question, maybe not. But as far as like you personally, at the helm and maybe just for the squad in general, what do you think, now that we're kind of talking to you almost midway through the season, what's been some of the biggest challenges for you this season, now that this is your first, full season with Orange County and with a roster?
Yeah, I think what we've probably struggled with most through the season so far, and, particularly probably until maybe a month or so ago, was really consistency of availability of some players from injury and therefore being able to, I think, have some consistent rhythm on the field. And I think, for example, Tristan Traeger was not healthy until, 6 weeks or so ago. And then, unfortunately, I think he was coming back into actually finding some rhythm, finding full fitness and feeling some flow in the way that he was playing. I felt, the game he played against Colorado Springs in that victory, that was, I think, probably the first time where I've looked at him on the field and said, right, I feel like he's finding himself again there. But that's, we're talking, I don't know how many weeks, but probably, 15, 18 weeks really before we're really fully seeing that side of thing. And then unfortunately now he's picked up an injury, and we hope he recovers quickly. And then we've had some similar situations with Ethan Zubak as well. And these are two key centre forwards for us. And I think, it goes without saying that if you're missing your two key centre forwards probably in your group, it's going to be something that is more difficult for you. And, Ethan had an unfortunate injury with the contact and the contusion he had on his foot from the end of the Sacramento game, which kept him out for 5 or 6 weeks. And then unfortunately quickly coming back from that, just had a bit of groin tightness, which wasn't a long-term thing. But again, you can see from Saturday how important it is to have an Ethan Zubak, a Tristan Traeger, as potentially an option in the group as a number 9. Because the reality is, as we see on Saturday, games are won and lost by scoring goals at one end and stopping goals at the other. And, everything that goes on in between and around that is a massively important part of the game. But in both boxes is where you're eventually going to win or lose. And like I said, I was very, very pleased with how we defended our box on Saturday. And of course, we rewarded ourselves for 3 good opportunities that we created towards the end of the first half. And honestly, we probably, I would say, actually had the next best chance of the game in the final minute with a counter-attacking situation that unfortunately Pedro just can't quite get his foot on the end of. But look, again, this was a performance where we probably showed a couple of aspects that we hadn't quite shown in both boxes as often as we could and should have previously. But we remain, a team that, like I say, I feel is in a good place in general. Plenty of room for improvement, don't get me wrong, and plenty of aspects that, we have more future targets that we set ourselves as a team that we want to achieve. And, these are ways of us getting better and earning more points as we move through the season here. But like I said, I feel we're actually some quite small margins away from achieving much better results. And so this is why I don't feel negative at all in any way. And, I fully believe in the group that we have. And, it's nice, like I said, to be able to go into a bye weekend, which comes around after a victory. That's a much nicer way to go into that. And you feel better about the time that you have then to prepare for the next game versus a result that doesn't go your way. So, we're working hard, and we think we are not far away from, I think, much more consistency in some of these results.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fantastic to hear, especially from you. I think fans in general are still very hopeful because we see that talent, on the pitch. We trust you at the helm for sure, talking to a lot of fans. But it's been a roller coaster so far. And I think, one of those elements has been, of course, injuries that we've all, seen and felt and have been disappointed in,
especially
with, Grayson Duty being out for the rest of the season. Yep. That was a huge blow, I know, to you guys, to us as fans, with Traeger being out as well. And, hopefully everybody stays healthy from there. But is there any kind of plan, and not that you can really answer this for sure, but is there any plan to kind of strengthen the squad further in this summer window? Or is the focus really just about getting the squad healthy and, finding that chemistry and pushing them forward?
I think the initial is always the day-to-day and the players that we have here and the team that we have here, we'll work hard with them. I think I've been very impressed with how the group have worked and trained over the last 6 or 7 weeks, particularly. I feel we took a step forwards in some of the training work and some of the culture and the habits on the training field, which again is something that does take a little bit of time at the beginning of a season as teams gel together. But the training environment is very important. So the first answer to your question is, first and foremost, effort and energy and focus goes into working with the players and the team that we have at our disposal here, and we believe in this group, and we have good players here that we work with. I think at the same time, I think every team in the league right now is also looking at always areas that they can improve as the season goes. So I mean, without having specifics for you, I think it's always something that, every coach and every team is looking at their roster and looking at their squad. And of course, now you get 10, 12 games in, you have a good feel, I think, for sort of where you feel you have strength, where you feel you might need improvement, where you can add to the squad. So of course, everybody is looking at that same situation, I think. And but for me, that's something that if we bring players in, we begin working with those players when they arrive. But right now, my focus is today's training session and tomorrow's training session with the group that we have here, and having a little bit of rest time this week for some who have put in a good shift over the last few weeks, especially with two difficult away games, and we'll recover a couple of bodies, and we have the nice luxury, I think, now this week of just being able to have a slightly calmer week without a game on the Saturday, and then, like I say, we build it up again to Sacramento next weekend.
Yeah, and that kind of perfectly sets up my next question, just in general, of when you do have a bye week, especially coming off of a really big win. Not just a win, but obviously the first one on the road and the first shutout of the season, like we've mentioned multiple times before. But how do you guys keep the momentum, going into the next match, which is also going to be, a cup match, and then continue that into the league when you do have a bye week? Like, is this a time for more of rest and relaxation to, recover from the season that we've gone through so far? Or is this a time where you try to push forward on that momentum and train kind of extra hard? Or, of course, and I'm sure the answer is more of a mix of both.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the answer absolutely is a mix of both of those things because they're both important, honestly. It's I think initially it's some rest, some recovery. That doesn't mean we're not training. It doesn't mean we're not working. But I think, it's a slightly different week this week in terms of not preparing for a Saturday match. So we do have, like I say, that we'll look at it as an advantage of saying, look, we can tailor the week physically as we need to. We can make sure that players, if they need a little more recovery time, it's a good week to do that. But at the same time, we don't stop training. We don't stop working. We keep pushing, and there'll be an appropriate amount of load through this week. And then we'll allow the players some time, just as much mentally, to have a little bit of downtime when we do have these weekends without a match. But that doesn't come at the expense of obviously being in a good place to start again next week and to push hard towards Sacramento. So I mean, yeah, listen, you answered the question for me. Really, it's a combination of both of those things, but for the reason that they are both very important. So it's a long season, the USL season, and it's there's a lot of elements to it that are tough physically, tough mentally, and it's important, I think, when you do get these opportunities to take those and to give people some freshness and some recovery in the mind as well as the body when we do come back to push. And this is something I believe in heavily as a coach, is when we ask players to push, I want them to be in as fresh a place as possible to be able to do that. And so this is a good week for us to balance those two factors for sure.
Danny, the club is obviously gone for the next 11 days, so to say, most of the way through June at this point. What would you like to see, or what do you need from the fans for the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to that is simply probably to repeat what I've said a few times, is when we play at home at Championship Stadium, we feel the energy of the fans. And as I know this as a player, I certainly know this as a coach, you reciprocate energy. And the first job is for us to give the fans something to get behind, and to give the fans, moments in the games where it's exciting and where we give them, something to cheer and to support. But players feel this energy. And so the biggest thing it's a word probably I use more than anything else in my work with teams is energy. And players hear me say this all the time. Your energy is so important. The energy that you give, not just for yourself, but for your teammates, is important. And this is no different when we're creating an environment in the stadium. It's like I said, it's a reciprocal thing where every bit of energy, every bit of noise, every bit of support that the fans can give players is felt, and it's reciprocated, and it's a really important part. And it works both ways, like I said. But it's recognised, I think, is a good message. It's certainly recognised, and it's very, very important for the players, because the reality is every player that we have, every member of staff that we have, we want to go out there and do as well as we possibly can for Orange County Soccer Club and for the fans that support us. There's no day where we go out training, and there's certainly no match day where we arrive and we don't want to go and win a game and put on performance that everybody deserves. So the knowledge behind that is that everybody is putting in everything they can to be successful. And I think if the fans hear that and then they recognise that in the performances, then I think they have something to get behind. And this is key for us. So it's they're a hugely important part of why we do this. And like I've said a couple of times, that is my biggest message, is to please stay behind the team and let us hear you and give your energy, and we will do everything we can to give it straight back to you.
Thank you, Danny. One final question. We presume you've got a day off. How are you going to spend it?
If I'm honest with you, I haven't quite decided on that yet. So I don't know. It's sometimes when I have these days off, I almost deliberately don't plan and schedule too much, because the rest of my week and my life tends to be fairly scheduled. So sometimes on the days off, it's nice not to have too much planned and not too much scheduled on the books as such. So that's where I stand right now. But any suggestions, I'm all ears. Believe me, I think there's still a lot of Orange County that I haven't probably explored yet. So any suggestions and any advice would be welcomed, definitely.
Say, grab yourself a hat, some sunscreen, sit down on the beach, and just
definitely a hat.
Have some Malort.
No, maybe not some more work. You can save that for us, I think. Ladies and gentlemen, your coach for Orange County Soccer Club, Danny Stone. Danny, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
When he mentions things like parity and the way that they set up in transition and perform in transition, it makes me feel like every once in a while, maybe 2 to 3 times a year, I say something on the show that
you're getting it right.
Be accurate. Yeah, so lucky me. DK, you were maybe less excited when we started this and we were recapping this match, and I was maybe more excited. Do you feel more optimistic about the way that things are going after speaking to Coach Stone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of impossible not to feel a little bit inspired when listening to Coach Stone talk about the squad and the game and what they're looking forward to. That's always been one of the big reasons, just the snippets we got to see of him towards the end of last season and clips that we've seen of him talking to the team, as well as interviews after the game. I fully trust Coach Stone, and I can't wait to see what he does with a full season. I think even though I obviously wanted to talk about things that I wanted to see this team improve on based off of the performance that we saw in El Paso. One, I'm not an expert on the game, and it's great to hear from the man himself on the strategies that they had. So, maybe some of the, tactics that were put into this before the game even started kind of shut me up in my criticisms. But at the same time, I think some of those are still valid. One of the things that I think that we did so well, when we were hot last season and have done well when we're hot this season, is that kind of complete team play passing, where it's, simple passing around the field. And again, not trying to do too much with it, but keeping possession and moving up into the final third with a plan and using both the left and the right to our strengths. Cameron Dunbar, Ryan Dogman, getting it up to Zubac or Traeger when he's back as well. Utilizing Kyle Scott in that kind of best manner to orchestrate how things go. I know I've used that a couple times in this podcast, but yeah, that's what I love to see from the team. And I think we saw that in the 10 minutes that we got 3 goals against El Paso. And I think we've seen that in the beginning of the season. And so that's something that I just want to highlight as I want to see more of moving forward. And of course, they have their plans on how to tackle each team. So I will leave that up to Coach Stone, and listening to him talk, I'll follow him anywhere. So
Perhaps you're going to be one of the reinforcements that they are maybe looking at.
I can maybe play a whole 5 minutes with
that. Is 4.5 longer than I had you taken for, to be honest. We ran a poll. Thank you, producer Andy. OC is 50% of you said back. Only 40% of you said so effing back. And 10% said what? If we win another match 3-0, we are so effing back. I promise you that. DK, anything that you learned this week? Probably not. I mean, it's just been me talking at you. And Brad, despite not being here, has made it a performance as DK has now pulled a Brad. So we are very consistent.
There had to be one Brad pull here. So yeah, I mean, not a ton learned, obviously, since it's just the two of us. But I think I did learn, some from talking to Coach Stone. And I think the biggest thing that me as well as fellow fans should take away from this is that Coach Stone is confident in the team that we have right now. And although I think any team in any league at any point could use, a little bit more of strength by pulling from maybe, elsewhere, signing a new player or something like that. I think that's all great. And the idea is there for everybody. But it's wonderful to hear from the gaffer that the squad that we have now has the ability and he has the confidence in them to take us all the way. So maybe it was just an assumption that I had before, and now I learned by specifically talking and asking him about it. But he's got the confidence in this squad, and it gives me more confidence in the squad. So that's what I learned.
Fair enough.
What about you, Dylan? Did you learn anything in this Dylan and Keith show?
I think I mentioned it earlier, but every once in a while I do say something that is smart, and I think it is more frequently than Ray. Despite him with all the coaching experience, I a thing or two more than him. Or I've just gotten really lucky week after week. Everybody, we've got a weekend off this week, so I hope you find yourself something lovely and fun to do on Saturday as a result. We will be back here next Tuesday with the show. There will be a handful more of us that week. But this week, for Keith, for producer Andy, for Coach Danny Stone, and myself, this has been the Orange and Black Soccer Cast. And we are